Hey, it's David. Let's get on with the bobber build and let's have a look at the seats. Now, some of you are going, hang on a minute, what happened to the mudguard? Well, the answer is nothing has happened to the mudguard. It's on the bike, it's functional, I can use it so long as the weather's dry and it's not wet out. And I've just bodged the speedo cable hanger in a way that it doesn't touch the wheel. So for the moment it's functional and it's okay. I'm waiting for some abrasives and some bits and pieces like filler primer and such so that I can get on and paint it. But that's on hold for a moment while I get that stuff arranged. So the next thing is the seat. Now, I think the seat is in a class of its own. It's something that I think really needs to be changed on all of these bikes, even if you don't bobber them. Although I will concede there is some good excuses for the seat it's currently got on it. The saddle is the thing that I find the most incongruous on these bikes. The original bikes from the 40s and the 50s had the sort of spring type saddles on them. Sometime, I'm not sure when, in the 70s, 80s, Harley went to this sort of pillow stuck on the bike, maybe because riders were getting bigger and heavier. I don't know, but that's pretty much what you see on the later bikes, is this big fat pillow. Having decided to replace the saddle, then we've got to decide just where we want to put it, and that's not quite as easy as it might seem at first sight, because there's a few things we need to take into account in deciding where we want that saddle to be. And there's a difference, for example, between where it's perhaps the most comfortable for it to be to where it looks good, and to where it might be most authentic as a bobber. So let's have a play. If we check out the height of the stock seat on the bike, then you can see that its nose of the seat is just north of this line here, so it comes down. So that would seem to be about a reasonable height to have the saddle. So let's see how easily the passenger pad comes off. Right, so this is what we're dealing with, and this very sharp angle here is why a lot of bobber kits that you can buy, you can't fit the saddle with this in the way, because there simply isn't enough room. And looking how much space this takes up, I suspect I'm going to have the same problem. Let's have a test fit and see what we've got. Right, well, it looks to me like there is plenty of room here. Depending exactly where the seat goes, of course. So that will be the next experiment. So after some playing, I think this is going to be roughly its mocked up position. I'm not sure on the height on the back yet. At the moment the seat's quite a long way up, but that's quite normal because there should be a little bit of spring compression, but I think it's just a fraction too high at the back. But I've just got random blocks of wood under it, so it's pretty luck of the draw as to exactly how the back is. But I think the front's where I want it, and that's the bracket I need to make next. Move the seat out of the way. Then we've got the bracket here. Now there are two holes here which are convenient, and it needs to mount right in this space here. Now there's a lip here, which means running something underneath that isn't going to be that easy, and there's another lip at the back here, so I think I've got to have a plate that goes across the top. So keeping it strong enough is going to be a bit of a challenge for the seat front to bolt there. On the other hand, it's not a lot of weight that the seat there is carrying, so I'm going to do some playing around and see what I can come up with. With a bit of trial and error, I'm in the process of making a bracket for this, which will mount the seat. Now, I've ended up a lot higher than I originally thought, but if you take into account the line of the tank, you could just keep going down, but it actually works quite well to be sitting here, so that you get a bit of a gap here, but you get that on a lot of the modern Sportsters. You get a bit of a gap, but it's actually going to flow across and up to the seat. And one of the things you'll see if you look back at the sort of 40s Harleys and whatever, is that the seats actually sat up quite high and they stuck out sort of in the middle of nowhere. Just made a sort of an angled piece of 3mm steel, which I'm looking to weld on the front there, so that will then bolt on there, and if I can hold it all together, this will then allow this to hinge freely. Now, I could have just discarded this bracket and made my own, but I thought I'd go with this bracket, and I'm quite glad I did because it's quite nicely made. So that'll bolt in there, and then it's got a full range of movement wherever I want the saddle to be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this off here, and this bracket bolts into that piece we saw before, and it's got a cutout for the tongue. But for now, first things first is to tack this on here, so that I can drill it and put a nut on the bottom and just generally clean it up. So that's the seat roughly mocked up. It is a little bit higher than the original saddle, not unreasonably so. I'm not convinced about the bracket though, to be honest. If I were to plate over these ends, perhaps it might look a little bit better, and certainly by the time it's painted black you won't really notice it very much at all. However, it sticks out to me like a bit of a sore thumb because it's square, and everything on this bike is round. I appreciate there are some sort of flat plates, but they're pretty much hidden, and even the end there is rounded, and the edges are sort of rolled and rounded. If I plated over the ends of those, I could round that all around so it would look better, but I'm torn. I'm not entirely sure about it. What I might do, and what I'm thinking of doing, is mocking up a different bracket to see what effect that has. I've cut a piece of tube roughly to length, slightly oversized perhaps, and just quickly chopped a lump of a section at the bottom, it's still hot, to clear this lip here. Now I'm going to need somewhere fastening it down, so I'm going to have to put a flat plate across here that I can weld this to, so that will sit there. So I've tacked the tube onto the plate, and so that's looking okay. This screw's a little tight getting out, it's just fouling the edge there, but it's doable. And this just hooks under there. So what I need to do now is just profile off the ends, as I did with this one, and this time I'm going to plate over them, which is a normal way of capping a tube. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to look at adding the attachment point, which I've decided is going to sit out here, a bit like the previous one did. So the bracket is now mocked up, and I say mocked up because it's just tacked together. I don't think I'm going to untack it, so I'm now going to weld it up. But this is pretty much its finished form. Underneath, you can see I've slotted that and bent down this tongue so that this fits into the original seat fixing. It doesn't really do a lot, but it does help keep it stable and help stop it pulling up. If you sit on the back of the saddle, it's not necessarily downward force on here, you can have a bit of a pull up force on here as well. So that's a bit of a safety measure to counter against that. I've sloped the sides, I've tacked on a couple of pieces of steel, and I've got the mount bracket on the front. You'll notice this is square stock here, and that's because the bracket has a flat top surface to it, so I couldn't use tube. If I had used tube, I'd have had to put a flat surface on the top of it in order for it to mount securely to without wobbling. So that's now pretty much as it is. It's not entirely square, but it's close enough to do the job. So my next task is to do some welding up on this. I can't finish cleaning this for the same reason I haven't finished cleaning up the front mudguard, which is I need to go and buy some more tools, and particularly some more abrasives, so that I can get the finish on this that I want. So, but once I've done this, this will be the front mount done for the saddle, and now, or after that, I will then need to figure out how I'm going to mount the springs on the back. So this is the bracket welded up and roughly shaped. It's looking a bit bright there. That might be better. So it's roughly shaped, as you can see there's weld splatter and stuff, and I've just roughly ground it back to some of the welds off, so it's roughly back to shape. But there we are, so that's what it's looking like now, and I'm quite happy with that. It suits the bike much better than the previous version, which was, as I say, perfectly functional. Again, not finished cleaning up, is out of character with the bike. So let's see what it looks like with a saddle on. Right, so that bolts in, and if we just sit it there, now what we can see here is that this is roughly the same height as the previous saddle was. So that's not necessarily the most pretty attachment in terms of the saddle. So that will go further forward, depending on where I want it to go. So it's got a range of movement. That's its furthest forward position. And so that, I say, is that. For that, now we need to see what we're going to do at the back end. Right, so that's the front mount for the seat mocked up. A little bit more work to do to it, just like the front mudguard. So that'll come in its own due time. But for now, the next phase is to have a look at the spring mountings for the back of the seat. I've got a pretty good idea what I want to do, but I need to do some more mocking up, a bit more playing around. It might break down into more than one episode to actually get that rear mountings for the saddle made up in the way that I'm happy with. So thanks very much for watching, coming along and with the build, and I'll see you guys again soon.